couple weeks ago, I finished my first Generation 1 Pokemon playthrough in over 10 years, and I will tell you what, looking back on these games, there were some flaws. Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow are from a simpler time. The good old days, if you will. But sometimes simple is better. And to that end, I think that the simplified Movepools from Generation 1 actually did one hell of a job of bringing balance to a Pokemon game. In short, I think Generation 1's main gameplay did two things better than any mainstream Pokemon game does nowadays. The games treated the players firmly but fairly, and even the playing field among Pokemon. Put your pitchforks down, put them down. I know Generation 1 had like 800 less Pokemon in the universe than now, probably making it a lot easier to have balance. I know that Psychic had an immunity to Ghost, and were generally OP throughout the whole series, and I know that Pokemon like Scyther, with their limited move pools, were actually pretty crappy, Scyther being a bug flying type that learns no bug or flying type moves, unless it's Pokemon Yellow where it does learn Wing Attack at level 50. I get it, the game has glitches, and some of them can really shift the balance of power at points, but we're not here to talk about what Generation 1 got wrong. Like the title says, we're here to talk about what it got right. And if you play the main game the way that it was supposed to be played, instead of going on YouTube and searching for specific glitches, you'll find that the balance generated by Pokemon Movepools is actually pretty good. Maybe great. So let's talk about fairness. Like any good storyteller, I'll begin at the end. Lance's dragons had like no weaknesses, and if you didn't have Ice Beam, or take the time to raise your own dragon, it could be pretty damn tough. But this was awesome design. The dragon type as a whole was largely invisible until endgame, then boom, there's a wicked strong Dragonite. It felt like a final battle, a feeling that future Pokemon games have failed to replicate. I mean, if you play Pokémon Sword, you know that in the first 5 minutes, you're gonna be fighting a Charizard at the end of the series. So you could probably just use Surf. But it wasn't that easy in Generation 1. Dragons resisted Charizard's Flamethrower, Blastoise's Hydro Pump, and Venusaur's Solar Beam. Dragons as a type felt mystical, and in turn the final battle felt special and epic, but it also was fair. Sure, dragons resist all 3 of your starter's typings, but actually the strongest dragon move in the game is the aptly named Dragon Rage, a move that would scare me back into diapers early game, but by the time you get to the Elite Four it felt justified. Doing 40 points of consistent damage could put pressure on you with its consistency, but would never be a true sweeping threat. And that's it. Dragon Rage is the only dragon move in Generation 1, and because it does a consistent 40 damage, there's no actual stab dragon moves within the game. Matter of fact, the only stab move any Pokemon in Lance's party knows is Gyarados' Hydro Pump. Add in the fact that Dragonite's only other attacking move is Slam, and the strongest Pokemon that you will have seen to this point has no stab moves and no ability to be super effective against any Pokemon at all. The game is firm, but the game is also fair. Of course, Lance's team is so powerful it shouldn't matter, right? But his Pokemon are riddled with hindering moves. Aerodactyl hurts itself with Takedown, Dragonite and Dragonair rely on inaccurate slams to cause damage, and then all of his Pokemon know Hyper Beam, which of course is very powerful, but requires a turn off afterwards. Theoretically, Game Freak could have swapped out a couple of these moves to make the game harder on the player, and they did so in Pokemon Yellow. Instead of the measly slam and no coverage move, Dragonite now knows Thunder, Fire Blast, and Blizzard. Instead of hurting itself with Takedown, Aerodactyl gets stab flying moves, while the 2 Dragonairs essentially are given a type. The first Dragonair is awarded Thunderbolt and Thunder Wave, making it a Raichu in Dragonair clothing, while the second Dragonair receives Bubble Beam and Ice Beam, making it a buffed out Dugong. These changes align more closely with future generations, but in my opinion still hold back Lance's team enough to maintain strategic fairness. The added coverage makes the game a bit harder, but doesn't break the game because strategically a wide variety of Pokemon can still match up well. Any Grass, Electric, Dragon, or especially Ground-type Pokemon can pretty easily defend against the Dragonair that features Electric coverage. And any Water Pokemon resists the Dragonair with Ice-Water coverage while also having access to its own Ice moves, Dragonair's one weakness. Gyarados, like previously stated, is still a beast, but being 4 times weak to electricity, the answer is obvious. Lance's Aerodactyl, meanwhile, only has flying and normal moves, and can likely be walled by the same ground-type Pokemon that you used earlier, can be zapped by that same electric Pokemon that took out Gyarados, or can be drowned by the same water-ice Pokemon that took out one of the Dragonairs. Then there's the big kahuna. Lance's Dragonite has been upgraded with seemingly the ability to cover any of its weaknesses while dealing ridiculous damage, which still lines up very well with future Pokemon games, but there's a couple key differences. Dragonite still has access to no stab moves, uses its much weaker but still respectable special attack, and all of its moves are inaccurate, except for Hyper Beam, which of course requires a turn off afterwards. Unless Dragonite KOs your Pokemon, in which in Generation 1 it actually didn't have to take a turn off, because Gen 1 things. The coverage boost given to Dragonite in the Gen 1 expansion was a natural progression. You could use strategy to get through the rest of the Elite Four, but when facing Dragonite, you would be face to face with a Pokemon so powerful that it might take your whole team to defeat. Where my problem comes in is that this is just one Pokemon in Generation 1. In future generations, far too many of those Pokemon have the type of sweeping and coverage tenacity that I find to be unfair. For example, Leon's team in Sword and Shield has ridiculous Movepool coverage. Unless he's sporting Cinderace in his party, it's actually impossible for any one type to resist any of Leon's Pokemon. All of his potential team members hit every type at least normally, with a ton of super effective coverage. Dragapult and Haxorus hit super effective against 9 types, Charizard against 10 types, and if he's carrying Rhyperior, it hits 11 types with super effective moves. In Pokemon Yellow, this type of monstrous coverage only happens with Dragonite. The eventual rival battle after Lance boasts a team with Exeggutor, Ninetales, and Flareon that can be walled by rock types, a Magneton that can be walled by ground types, a Cloyster or Vaporeon that is resisted by water, and an Alakazam that's resisted by Psychic. The only Pokemon that can't be resisted is his leading Sandslash, which can't cover its own weakness of water, and Jolteon, which has the ultra-rare bug coverage with Pin Missile. The same can be said for the original Red and Blue, with the rock and electric coverage against Pidgeot's Movepool, Psychic resistance on Alakazam, Rhydon and Exeggutor unable to hit super effective on any Pokemon because they only know normal moves, and starters that all have at least one resistance based on their move pools, except Blastoise, which can use Bite to hit water and ice effectively. Sure, in future generations within the final tournament there's Pokemon like Grapploct, which only know fighting moves and are pretty easily walled off, but more often than not you're going to run into Pokemon with excessive coverage, which shifts the emphasis towards higher base stat totals, when Pokemon like Machamp and Barraskewda can hit 9 different Pokemon types with super effective moves. The emphasis becomes to try and get your strongest Pokemon out there and sweep as fast and decisively as you possibly can. That becomes the only strategy. Newer Pokemon games lose that simple strategy the game became loved for. Rock, paper, scissors type strategy isn't particularly complex or unique, but it existed, creating a low barrier to entry for new Pokemon, but still rewarding seasoned veterans. In that way, the game treated the player firmly, but it never felt unjust when an opponent one-hit KO'd you or swept your team. You knew it was a Charizard, and you sent out Venusaur. That was always your fault. But when my grass type is KO'd by a Rhyperior that knows Heat Crash, I'm justifiably a little pissed off. It's not just this specific battle though. In fact, Movepools from Generation 1 did a better job of evening the playing field despite base stat variation, and that's what really matters. So a lot of these useless Pokemon like Fat Cat and French Mushroom were actually quite useful, but not far-fetched. You always sucked. And you still do, sir. In Generation 1, Persian is a super fast normal type with lackluster other base stats. But in this generation, critical hits were correlated with the Pokemon's speed, which actually makes sense if you think about it, and Persian learned Slash. Slash is a stab move for Persian, and also had a heightened critical hit ratio. Pair Slash with high speed stat, and you could critical hit a lot, making the poor base stat Persian situationally very strong. And Parasect had its signature move, Spore, which was a 100% chance of putting a Pokemon to sleep. And if you remember from Generation 1, a Pokemon was not able to attack on the turn that it woke up, making this move downright glitchy, if not for Parasect's tortoise-like speed and generally lackluster base stats. So the move Spore itself was firm, but it was fair. So the move pools of some of these weaker Pokemon was able to keep them relevant despite their lower base stats. But like previously mentioned, the move pools worked as well for the stronger Pokemon, keeping them from being god tier and just sending everyone to their grave immediately. Machamp, for example, despite his monstrous attack stat, is held back by his strongest fighting move, Submission. Take the time to raise this muscle-bound freak, and you could obliterate most Pokemon, but would also hurt yourself in the process. Alternatively, you might be forced to use a more conservative, but less powerful move. These semi-hindering move pools given to Lance's team and Pokemon like Machamp made the top tier of Pokemon seem extremely dangerous without being completely unfair. This made Pokemon seem like a mild strategic challenge or a simple puzzle. The game wasn't really hard, you could always train more and there's no game over, but you got that little sense of accomplishment when you came up with a quick strategy for that fully evolved opponent. As a player, you could be clever and you could lay status, you could wall off your opponent, or you could just find the right type matchup in order to win. But if the player got lazy or he or she wasn't paying attention for a moment, any Pokemon in the game could take you out. Which brings me to my final point. Because of simpler move pools, you could punish or be punished by any Pokemon in the game. Let me ask you a question. Assuming they're the same level, in modern Pokemon games, are you more likely to be KO'd by an Arbok or a Charizard? If you answer Charizard, you're correct, and you also have a pulse, because it's a very easy answer. Charizard is fast, strong, and has an extremely good move pool in future generations. But in the earlier generations, it's not quite that easy. In Generation 1, Charizard pretty much only knew Flamethrower and Slash. If it's Pokemon Yellow, it also can learn Fly. Arbok, on the other hand, learns Poison Sting, which can cause poison, Glare, which can paralyze you, and of course, the dubious Generation 1 Wrap, so you can watch your health whittle away and cannot attack back. This would be cheap if it were a stronger Pokemon, but Arbok has a pretty weak move pool, a type that only hits super effective against one Pokemon, and pretty bad base stats. That's not to say that Charizard or Arbok are better. Charizard probably is still the better Pokemon overall, but in Generation 1, the point is if you send out any Pokemon or encounter any Pokemon, you could still get in trouble regardless of what Pokemon it was. Battles were just that, situational. Honest could wrap you or wall you off, but was 4 times weak to water and grass. Hitmonlee has extremely high attack, but a high jump kick might miss and really do some damage to itself. Parasect was slow and weak, but had a 100% chance of putting you to sleep, and then really could get some good slashes in. All these Pokemon have extremely different base stat variations and extremely different base stat totals, but they're all equally able to KO you or cause a lot of trouble in battle because of the move pool balancing. This is a beautiful thing from Generation 1. It allows me to choose to raise any Pokemon I want and still have a utility. It allows the opposing Pokemon to feel challenging situationally, and it also makes it so that I can't raise 1 or 2 specific Pokemon and have them just be gods, because that's not fair and not fun. Move pools today manage to overdo coverage to the point that you can rely on any singular Pokemon given above average base stats. In modern games, you can raise a Charizard with Flying, Dragon, and Fire type coverage with no TMs and HMs. That means that it can hit every single type at least effectively straight out of the box. Where's the fun in that? This makes the prior mentioned Onix, Hitmonlee, and Parasect completely laughable. Where's the fun in taking Pokemon out of the game like that? Where's the strategy in having a move pool so utterly dominant that you can just destroy any Pokemon? The game no longer has any part of strategy in it. It simply becomes get the strongest base stat Pokemon, put it in front of your party, and then run your way to the Elite Four. On the contrary, Generation 1 Charizard only learns Fire, Flying, and Normal type moves organically, which is great because it's great sweeper moves for a great sweeper Pokemon. You might critical hit Slash, you might Flamethrower through any grass or bug type Pokemon and feel amazing. But what it also means is that when you're in Victory Road and you encounter a level 40 Onix, you have to switch out. You're stuck. You don't have coverage for this Pokemon. A random wild encounter makes me strategically have to switch out with my starter, my strongest Pokemon. That's an amazing feeling that a random encounter like that can cause strategic decision making, despite the fact that you're probably a higher level and Onix is 140 base stat points lower than you. The expanded coverage in later generations makes previously situational Pokemon like Arbok and Onix completely useless, which is a shame because they were pretty much face of the franchise type Pokemon to start the series, and I think are very cool designs at least. This isn't all to say that modern Pokemon games are bad, just to point out that because of expanded move pools, base stats have become even more important than they already were. Which stinks because Pokemon like Beedrill, Tropius, Ninjask, Primeape, Piloswine, and Mightyena have undeniably cool designs, but are outclassed by almost all other options in any playthrough, unless you commit to over-leveling, or have a personal affinity like I do to Beedrill. Perhaps more importantly, it ruins the concept behind some more varied Pokemon move pools like Butterfree and Noctowl. In the first two generations, these Pokemon learned flying and psychic moves, so they not only had access to some of the best moves in the game with psychic moves, but they also had coverage to the point where they could hit everything at least effectively except Steel, an extremely rare type at the time. With expanded coverages, however, these Pokemon have lost their best advantage, which was that move pool variation, and they are now just low base stat pieces of crap. They're terrible. But expanded move pools couldn't be bad, right? They should, in theory, allow me to raise any Pokemon I want and be happy with the move pool that it learns. But for me, it has actually worked out the opposite way. When I first played Pokemon Sword, I was organically raising a Mudsdale, Pangoro, Snorlax, and Copperajah because I mean, come on. These things are sick. Great designs. But about halfway through my journey, I realized a problem. Mudsdale with no TMs learns Fighting, Ground, and Steel. Pangoro naturally also learns Fighting and Steel, but has an additional Dark move availability. Snorlax with no TMs or HMs learns Normal, Dark, Ground, Fighting, and Steel moves. Copperajah naturally learns Steel, Fighting, and Ground. Despite all four of these Pokemon having completely different types, they overlapped in move pool availability, to the point where I actually had to drop Pangoro and Copperajah because they were utterly redundant in the moves that they learned. I thought that move pool availability was supposed to increase my chance to raise any Pokemon I want and be happy with its move pool, but in actuality, all it does is make redundancy when everyone wants to learn the same good moves. Everyone learns the same good moves. And this is without TMs and HMs. God forbid I teach a fighting move to my starter, then I have so much redundancy it's unbelievable. But TMs do exist. I'm not trying to deny that, and I love TMs. Raichu learning Thunderbolt in the first generation or Blastoise learning Ice Beam was an amazing feeling. It felt like I was releasing the power of my Pokemon. But you had to be careful because you only got one and they might break. And at the end of the day, it made sense. I'm the protagonist. I'm supposed to find the TM in the back of the cave and use its power to defeat the final battle. That's an amazing feeling. It made sense that the protagonist, me, would have new unique abilities compared to other Pokemon. But when the versatility bleeds into Pokemon's learn sets and also into some of the more premier important battles within the series, it makes me question whether I'm special or not. As a protagonist of the game, I'm supposed to be a special character. I found the TM in the back of the cave that made all the difference against Lance. I used the TM that the gym leader gave me in order to eviscerate my opponents. I'm a special person on the way to win the Elite Four. That's a special feeling. But instead, in the new games, I'm just a long line of anxious teenagers riding their bike around trying to sell watts for TMs or standing in line at the battle tower in order to make the perfect Pokemon. That's not fun and special. I don't feel like the protagonist. I feel like one of many. Generation 1 was not perfect. The PC box system was terrible, the inventory was super small, and the leveling decisions I don't particularly agree with. But I left the game with a new appreciation for the generation as a whole and the way that they did move pools. It felt like I had true flexibility to pick whichever Pokemon I wanted, not thinking about base stats. I got to feel like a kid again. I see a Pokemon, I like it, it's in the party, it's gonna be useful somewhere because the simplified move pools allowed all Pokemon to be useful. Less coverage meant each battle had the potential to require some strategy. It also meant that I could be checked by any Pokemon at almost any time. I also had to value some Pokemon that I normally wouldn't just because of their move pools and the moves that they learned, making them strategically relevant. During my playthrough, I had to switch out, heal, revive, and scurry back to the PC in situations I would not have expected, because I wasn't a demigod aimed for victory. I was a player. in a dangerous, mysterious, and wondrous world that was simply opened up to me with minimal direction. And that's a hard feeling to duplicate with modern Pokemon games. Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you liked, please hit the like button below and consider subscribing to my channel. This is going to be one of maybe 2 or 3 videos about Generation 1, and then I'm going to see if I can kind of work my way through the generations with one-off videos like this on some of the things that I'm opinionated towards. Otherwise, more Nuzlockes coming pretty much every day. We'll see if I can keep up with it, but pretty much every day, and more one-off videos coming in the future, so I'll see you guys there.